And I don't think you need any introduction at all, Linda, but just this is the very first time that we have had you speaking at a BAPT conference, and we are completely delighted that you're with us. So very, very welcome. You are a real thought leader in the field of typology. You've been training people in typology models since 1991. I know there's a number of our speakers who you have trained, and you help individuals and groups to thrive. And we're all really looking forward to hearing you talking about the transformational power of type for today and tomorrow. So warm welcome, Linda, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm recognizing people I've seen in Denmark, one or two, some people I've seen in the UK, long time ago when I did speak at a conference. So you hearing me okay? Yeah, all right. So I want to let you know first off that I'm really delighted to be here. And the other thing is that you will see on the screen something that says Stephanie Berens. Stephanie is not here. She's usually with me all the time when I'm teaching, but that's my husband's computer because I'm trying an experiment today. I want to see the participants while I'm screen sharing, and haven't had a chance for Carol to tell me her secrets on how she manages to get that to happen. So, so if I look over this way, I'm looking at you actually. And so just know I'm with you, and I really am happy to have you all here. So you gave me a little bit about me. I may be the oldest person in the room, close anyway. I've been around in the type world and APTI world since 1981, I believe it was, when Eve DeLunas and some other people put on a local conference that Alan Brownsword came and spoke at. I can't remember, I think that was it. I don't know, it was a long time ago. But anyway, so it's kind of like on the beginning of type. And I have lots of strange stories to tell about that, but we won't get into those stories. This is really my life work. I'm still obsessed about type. And I have now progressed to the stage at which I don't type the characters in my novel. I don't identify their types. And I don't do that when I'm watching television or movies anymore. So I'm making some progress in getting unobsessed. All right, so what I want to share with you today, first of all, I'll tell you, I don't know where I dreamed up the title of this, but I thought it would be a good thing to do. And then when I went to put the handout together, it was like, oh, yeah, there's an awful lot. So I hope you all read that 7-page book that I sent along and watched the videos ahead of time. But anyway, so we'll just start my screen share and see what I can do here with my technology. Screen sharing. And okay, here we go. Get that there. All right, well, you just have to put up with a little bit of klutziness here. Okay. Well, now I have to stop with my computer over here and see if I can, who knows what I'll see. Well, that's not what I want to see. Okay, I can't manage to do that anyway, so I won't be able to see all of you. Anyway, so excuse me. So what I want to do here is, do an agenda, because I often forget about the agenda. I know some people really like having them, so I did that. We're going to start off with a bit of history, and then I want to talk a little bit about some cultural trends. And mainly this whole idea is transformation and evolution. What's that about, and how might that be relevant to those of us who are type practitioners and type enthusiasts? or yeah, and then some evolving cultural themes, which is some stuff that I am not an expert in, but I have found it a useful construct to kind of think about. So you may decide you want to be an expert in it, and then we could talk about it and you could teach me. And then I would like us to get to some key practices and principles that will help us meet these needs of the emerging future and the transformational power of type in a chaotic world. Hopefully we will address that a bit. So I'm sorry. Oh, okay, so I was able to catch a couple of sessions, and I looked at almost all of the handouts. So I have a feeling I may be preaching to the choir here, but I am known to get on my soapbox, just ask some of the people who've taken my trainings. You know, I always earmark them with sermons. So just so you know that there is a lot here. But let's get to the history thing. So here's the history thing, right? I want to put this here. Okay, so you've probably seen this in the article. This was something I wrote in 2002 before I went to Australia to do a keynote and work in their conference. And you see it ends over here at 2010. I added the beginning because type is way more than 100 years old. And by the way, my understanding of type is not just Jungian type. Jung, I had to read a bunch of books that David Kersey made me read for my dissertation that were written in the 1920s. And the typologies in the 1920s, there were many of them, that's in this here, but they go back way back into probably 300 BC, or maybe that's 200 BC. I don't know how you figure that out, but it was people who were born in the year 300 and something. Anyway, so there is that. And what isn't here is this. You know, it's not on there. I haven't updated this graphic yet. And since this ended in 2010, the last time I updated it, there have been a lot of changes. And what's current on my mind is not only the issues with that so-called documentary called Persona, but also other kinds of things that seem to be a kind of a threat for us. So I think, what in your mind is the biggest threat to type in general, to your use of it, your practice of it? And just type some of those things in chat so we can kind of get those out of the way. And maybe we'll address some of those now and maybe not, and I'll write a blog post about them. So all I have to do is find my chat. Yes, quick fixes. And misconceptions, unethical, misinformation, yes. I think the quick, easy diagnosis is people often want that. But let me get my chat up here so I can see it. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is by a lot of people who are self-taught and who are, some of them are doing really good work and some of them are a little less good. So, and then some people see it as old. Oh, good point. What else do we have here? I got all of those. Okay. All right. So searching the internet, a lot of misinformation. I don't know if anybody mentioned biases. I would say that's one of the things, is that over the years, I've discovered that there are an awful lot of biases in things that some of the other experts wrote. And lo and behold, I found a few in mine. So if you find anything in something I've written, please let me know, because I'm on a crusade to get rid of biases. All right, so, all right, let's see, lots and lots of things. So we have all of these challenges with things that are some threats. And I thought some of what helps when there are some threats is that that we're armed with some information and some sense of what that information would help us with. So I have a next question is I want to talk to you about, and let's discuss and explore, transformation. So, I thought of this title for the thing, and then I thought, oh, I have to really pay attention to what does transformation mean? And so, the classic thing of the butterfly, and that template for that butterfly to expand into a butterfly from this caterpillar over here. The template was in the caterpillar at the beginning. And so I don't know about you. I think type saved my life. I finally felt normal and discovered my husband was the same kind of normal as it turns out. So that's kind of interesting, although it wasn't so abnormal for him to have INTP preferences. And I thought I would ask you, I'm just going to do a very quick, Sarah, if we could do a breakout group. I want to ask you to just share in private with a few other people. How have you been transformed through type? And we'll just take maybe 3 minutes in a breakout room and have you share some of that.
Okay, I've just opened the breakout rooms now. So if people can just admit themselves, and as Linda said, you'll have 3 minutes.
So I find that very helpful to be able to see what people have said later. I may not be responding to it very much today as much, partly because the chat is showing up on my husband's computer and my mouse won't work it for some reason.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay, everyone's coming back in now, Linda.
Great, great.
So people can mute themselves again, please.
If you want to mute everybody at any time, I'll just remind myself to unmute.
Okay.
Okay. So I would assume that some people had some very rich transformations to share and would have liked maybe 10 minutes to talk. So for me, it was a very personal transformation and that I felt okay. And then what it was that I was able to have sort of a roadmap to understand my own development, which was helpful, and do all of that. So, okay, well, moving on then, as you're thinking about that transformation and how do we make it so that we can share that transformational power of type with others so that we can get some growth and development. So, here's some trends. I just copied this little thing here, the innovation adoption life cycle, right? So when some of us started out when we were in the innovators stage with type and it started moving up here and early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, and then there's a downward spiral. And somewhere in there, I saw that there were some people who, that the MBTI itself was seemed to be lagging in popularity. And I don't remember when that was. It was probably about 20 years ago. But they did some other things that, made it have more viability. And I think the step 2 development probably increased some of that. So some of the trends I've noticed, and I added to the first one after Marianne's presentation. One is this increased complexity. So the world is increasingly complex. And in learning, what people want is they want bullet points. Just get it to me quick, give me the simple piece. And one of the big challenges with type work, in my view, is that if you just give bullet points, people don't get to try on the whole shoe when they're trying to figure out what fits them, because bullet points don't convey enough of the complexity and the richness of full patterns. So that's a trend. Decentralization and power shifts. If you looked at some of the resources I recommended reading, there have been trends over time that we're moving away from an authoritarian position into more equality. And that kind of started with Gore. When I was first started in my consulting practice, I wanted to work for Gore. Because they actually had a much more decentralized operational system. So there's a term now called the power shift movement, where using holacracy, for example, as an operating system where you have distributed authority, clear accountability, the boss has to sign, the creator or the CEO can't hire and fire, can't make unilateral decisions. They don't have all of the authority. They have the appropriate authority. So we have those kinds of things. And what does it take? It takes, with that trend, people owning their own power. You can't shift your power if you are giving your power away to someone else. So I think the type lenses that we use will help people own their own power. There are some major shifts in the culture. I'm going to cover that in detail a little bit more. That's the stuff that hasn't come into the type world very much. And that I'm not an expert in, but I know enough to be dangerous with it. Autonomy and interdependence. So there's this balance between away from authoritarian structures and having more autonomy and interdependence. And somebody already spoke to this one, shifts from credentials to free information. So you don't always know about the information and if it's accurate or valid or useful or whatever. And there seems to be some focus on connectivity and relationships. So maybe you have some other trends that you would like to make known that you've noticed in the chat. That would be helpful for us to reference at some point. So power is an emotion. Okay. I don't know what power is. I think a sense of feeling powerful is an emotion. I have to explore that a little bit. All right. So let me jump into the idea of evolution. I looked them up in the dictionary, and evolution seems slower and transformation may be quick. I don't know. But so with evolution, it's really a developmental process. So evolution is this, I think I'm on the wrong slide. Hang on.
No, that is the evolution slide, Linda.
Oh, thanks. That's not the one I want. I want this evolution slide. Okay. So what we have then is, this movement upward. And as we evolve, it grows and develops. And you notice that it's a spiral. Very often people talk about that as a spiral because you can go up and down the spiral. You can slip up and down. So when we look at some of the evolutionary principles, what we find out is that there are new themes that emerge as the previous themes no longer work. And that's, I'll give you some content about that in a little bit. And we have, in the beginning, these new characteristics are not very well accepted. So it's just the beginning. I often refer to my hippie days. So in my hippie days, I was getting my master's in counseling, braless, Birkenstocks, et cetera, et cetera. I volunteered at the free clinic. And they were trying to have a flat structure. And I said, but nature loves a hierarchy. And so people kept looking to the boss. So some of the evolutionary changes that had started then back in the, whenever that was, 1974, I believe, some of those were not well accepted. That's kind of the point I was making. And after a while, though, they become more refined and then more widespread. And then each later stage transcends the limits of the previous stage and still includes characteristics of that stage. So in our development, if we just think about type development, so I have pretty well practiced introverted thinking, but I also have a lot of attention to extroverted feeling in my world and in my behavior. So as I've gone through these sort of stages of development, there is a transformation that happens where it's qualitatively different, but it's still there. For type, that creates some problems for us, because when we're trying to help people figure out what their best fit type is, it can be really confusing because they've developed other aspects of themselves and it's qualitatively different. And one of the key points to make is that all stages have value. Okay. Now, here's the other evolution one. And if we look at individuals, I see this as there are a lot of individual development models that look very similar to the cultural ones in terms of the themes. But I'm thinking about how we see differences. When we're born, we don't recognize that we're different, that we're separate from, so we're merged. And that stays to some degree later on in life. There's a over-identification with the parent, for example. And then we start to notice, oh, I'm a little different. And then, oh, we're different, but my way's better. That often happens when we're introducing type, right? Oh yeah, we're different. Yeah, you're okay, you can be you, but my way's better. And then we get to be, we're different, but sometimes your way's better. So we start to take in that. And then there's a shift to say, well, all differences are good. So it really isn't just sometimes, but whatever difference there is that's relevant is good. And then there is a later shift where it's about unity and individuality at the same time. And when I have a lot of people who coming to our programs who are moving into that stage of development where they have a really hard time figuring out what their best fit is, especially if they're using the cognitive dynamics model, the 8 functions, to try to figure it out because they're using the different processes. Okay, so what are the cultural themes? And this is the, I gave you a reference in the handout about this and quite a bit of information. First of all, early on in life, in the evolution of humanity, what we did was just about survival. That's what the culture was like. It was all about survival. And then it became, well, we're better off if we're together. So it was tribal. But if everybody is equal in the tribe, then that's a little bit harder. And you start getting, some shifts there. And then what emerged out of that is what is called egocentric. It's like, it's about my needs and I'm going to do what I damn well please. Now, some of you may think of that stage as looking like what Kersey's descriptions of the improviser were, wanting the freedom to do what you want to do. This is not that. I don't know why these stages parallel and look like the essential motivator patterns or the temperament patterns, but they seem to do. And then a stage that came on after that was the authoritarian stage, and that's been online for about 5,000 years. So the meme or the value set that is that there needs to be somebody in charge, that there's the king or the boss or whatever, is very old and ingrained in us, and that it's all of these are useful even when we leave them behind. So sometimes that's an important thing, but for that aspect of the culture is still there and prevalent in other aspects of the culture. So if you're working with a culture that's highly power distanced as one of those features, or what's the other one? collective cultures, you might find more adherence to authoritarian, and that's going to affect how somebody's type pattern expresses. Okay, so just a bit of that. And then there's one, this is a word that was invented, I kind of like it, it's called the achievist. That's been online for at least 300 years. It started before, but it's pretty prevalent for 300 years. That for a long time has been the ceiling for culture. I mean, for education. The educational systems are about helping you achieve, helping you produce product, helping you learn all the things that you need to learn academically. And then there was a shift, and I think this came on, this is what I experienced in my hippie days, although it wasn't quite 50 years old. 50 years ago it was about 40. But this egalitarian, which says we're all equal, all the differences are good, and we're equal, and they want to flatten the hierarchy. And it turns out that having the hierarchy that's in nature. You can't really flatten it. It's still good. And what's come out of that now is some stages, some themes that are integrative, which is it's about seeing implications, seeing things in a broader way than you might have seen them before, and that we're integrating all of these things. The definition is in the handout of what this guy said. And then there is this holistic view, which is not much online. And then there is this oneness piece, that we are all one, that we're connected to the trees, we're connected to everything. So these are pockets of culture will have these themes. They're not, some of them are not as mainstream as others. But what happens is, as our culture is moving, if you look at when type was developed during that achievement-oriented stage. And so some of the ways we use it is we take a somewhat of a reductionist view. It's I'm an extrovert, or I'm a thinker, I'm a feeler, and those kinds of things, which kind of just makes it a little bit simpler, well, quite a bit simpler, but also misses some of the things. So I guess what I wanted to say is that our the culture influences what we can do with type in different environments. And as people move out of that, more and more people move out of that achievist stage or into a different kind of culture, they may be less satisfied with overly stereotypic views of type. And so that's my pitch. Take it or leave it, study some more, and then we can talk about it at another time. All right, so I bring this into light because I think it's important for us to recognize, that these are my arrows, I forgot to point those out. Those are the two stages that are kind of more active and a little bit more becoming more and more active in our cultures. Okay, so the reason I bring this is that my daughter made this meme. I guess it's called, she calls them memes. I don't know what they are, but it's a graphic for me. Okay, so when we're looking at you, what are the elements of you? And we're looking at our three lenses that we use, which, there's body or the energy piece, which is interaction styles. There's the mind, which is cognitive dynamics. And then there's, I for want of a better word, I call it spirit. I don't know where essential motivators or temperament comes from. But there is another aspect that's really key, and that is our beliefs, and the beliefs that are laid down very early on. And those come from your culture, the family, education, childhood, your development. And sometimes that involves some traumas. So as we're working with clients, we can't take the results of an instrument as the truth, because we don't know for sure how people are answering that instrument. You know, one of the biggest things that we used to talk about in the MBTI qualifying programs that I taught is that one of the things to watch out for is if you use an instrument in a work setting, that'll be the frame of mind people have. So getting them to think about their shoes off at home self might be a lot harder. So, and so because of these other aspects, we have to be, I believe, fairly cautious in using an instrument. And as you all may know or may not know, I'm not a fan of instruments. So we developed a self-discovery process that we use with people. I think my worst fear is that people want things so simple and quick and dirty that they're not going to be patient for it. But anyway, so just becoming aware of those things and how they can influence your pattern. So I want to share some slides that some of you may have seen before. We have to okay, so I almost want to say, you know, if I had my druthers, we would throw the instruments out. We would stop talking about E and I and S and N and T and F and J and P, because I have seen that do so much harm. But that's my view, and I know there are other views, and I've seen some excellent presentations in this workshop, in this conference, on how to use the Myers-Briggs and an instrument, and how to use it in a more conscious way so that it isn't all about the parts and bits and pieces. So I stand a bit corrected in my soapbox. But anyway, so we are whole. And the only way that you know, I mean, you know these are feet, right? But you also know that there are babies that are the whole baby. And so we're always dealing with wholeness and all of these other factors that come into play when we're looking at type. And so I just need to be clear, and there's a bit on the definitions in the handout. There are these approaches to type that some people take. So when people are talking about type, you don't really know. Big five, your type is constructed from factors. You just add them all up and that makes the type. In my view, that doesn't fly as a type. That's just interesting data. That could be very helpful in terms of traits, but not a type. Emerging patterns. So people that use Big Five, for example, or they use other things, and it's this pattern that's emerging now, and you see the interrelationships between something, and you can name that pattern. That's not a type either. And so many times in the type world, we talk about, you know, extroverts, introverts, you know, one side of a polarity. And when we make it a noun, we make it a type, but it's not a type. None of those are a whole organic pattern. So in my view, a type is an organic pattern. The rest of it are processes and patterns. Okay, so I would just invite you to think about that a bit. How do we know it's organic? Well, a lot of us have watched it over the years and seen that it hangs together in some way. So this is from the work of Fritjof Capra in terms of what is self-organization. We are organized. We are already organized, and we are constantly self-organizing. We're an energy field or an organizing system. And that's what it means to be human. We're self-organizing and we are self-maintaining. We do things to maintain ourselves. So when we look at essential motivators or temperament, we're looking at the core psychological needs, and we're looking at the talents that help get those needs met. And then we're also looking at the stressors that result when those needs aren't met. So we're doing things to help maintain that theme of our pattern. The same thing happens in the physical body. You go get food, and sometimes you get stuff that you shouldn't eat, but you go to maintain yourself. The exciting thing too is that it's also self-renewing. So just like our body renews cells, in our psyche we can renew ourselves. And whoops, hang on, left an important point out here. We're self-transcending. Okay, so that means that this is the transformational piece. That means that we stay the same, but we're not the same. So we transcend those limits for someone with INTP preferences who started out in the Association for Psychological Type telling people they were wrong. I backed off a little. You know, I've learned that people don't like to be told they're wrong and that there's a better way. And so what I learned was, how do I embrace where some of those people were coming from and understand how that's useful, and have a lot more patience with those things that I see. I haven't got it perfected yet, though. So when we want to understand, we're living systems. So when we want to understand a living system, the way you understand that system, if you want to really know it, you look at the pattern. Pattern stays the same. You look at processes. Processes are activities that help maintain the pattern. And you can look at the structure, which is that physical embodiment. And there's also a meaning and a purpose that goes with that. And so those are some of the things that Fritjof Capra identified. He's a multidisciplinary thinker with a degree in physics. I mean, so he comes from a science background. But this is how you know what a living system is. So if we want to know ourselves and own our own power, we have to understand the pattern and what is that pattern and what drives that pattern. And I've lost my, oh, there we go. Okay. So I've seen many people use this graphic. Well, it's not this one exactly, but it's the core self graphic. I'm very happy to see that it's helpful to people. So here we come into the world and there are all these things going on that influence us. And so there's this core self that has the template for what is there. Now, this might go counter to what Dario Nardi finds when he looks at people over time and seeing how their brain changes, because the brain's plastic. But our brain is not our psyche. Our brain is the embodiment of certain activities that we tend to use. And haven't talked with Dario about this for a long time, but as we grow and develop, we exercise new things, but still what was already developed is still there, in my view. Okay, so what happens is situation A comes in and B and C, and it pushes against the core self to behave in certain ways. And when that's out of sync, we get certain beliefs like I'm not good enough. When the environment is really different and we have this current behavior that seems to be required of us, we often don't own who we are as a value. So that will make a difference in terms of how we look at type. And it makes a difference in how easy it is or how difficult it is for people to find their best fit. And I have 7, 8 students in my courses recently. I would say 50% of them are still struggling with figuring out their type, their best fit pattern. And one of the ways, by the way, they get off track is by they keep looking at the processes, not the pattern. The cognitive dynamics, for example, how am I using this? That's a process. Okay, so we have the current behavior and the contextual self, and we are adaptable, but all this pressure comes in to be different, perhaps. Sometimes it matches, so that muscle gets stronger. Then the core self has a pattern of development programmed in, just like the butterfly. There is a natural pattern. That's my belief about type development. That's what you would expect to develop, all things being equal, but things usually aren't equal. So that pushes out. And what we get is what I like to say, we adapt to those things and we grow. And that's our developed self. And I say this, I like to tell people, this is who you really are, not just the core self, but you can't deny the core self. If you deny the core self, you will still have unrest and unhappiness. So it really helps to help people get a best fit. So what we're looking for when we're looking at type, or at least I'm looking for what is the constant core. What is constant And how has that been playing out over the years? And I've had several people come into the course who are still searching, and they got so many messages about how they are not okay when they were younger. So, and that's actually how the transformation worked for me. You know, I was rewarded for being conceptually smart, but I was not rewarded for my social skills and the messages of what a woman should look like in the 1950s and 60s. Okay, so all right, so this is just a little bit more about another graphic that Stephanie made, is that if we look at all of this, what we talk about true type is if you really can get to true type, but we hope so, that we have the various patterns, essential motivators, communication, which is interaction styles, and 16 type patterns. And those are patterns. And those are what will stay the same, but will look different. We have the processes, you know, directing, informing, initiating, responding, cognitive dynamics, all of those kinds of processes that take place that help maintain those patterns. And then we have the structure, which I can't really speak to. Dario can talk a little bit about how that shows up in the brain, but I think it also shows up in the body, certainly with interaction styles. And then there is another aspect, which is our purpose. And a lot of times we aren't spending much time thinking about what's our purpose. Why are we on the planet? What are we here to accomplish? I apparently have, you know, been put on the planet to preach my doctrine here. Okay, and so what I think will help us address some of the issues is to always think about holistic. So we use these holistic type patterns, and then these other lenses relate. They are, each lens gives a particular view at a particular aspect of each of the 16 types. So out of that, then of course, is this matrix, which I put in the handout, but I also talked about. We've got these are the patterns. And recently we've really discovered the patterns of the names that Dario Nardi and I came up with for each of them. And so for example, INTP, designer theorizer, I realized that I haven't been doing enough designing and that I need to do more designing because I was getting stressed. And I mentioned that in the course one day, and this other woman with the same preferences said, oh my gosh, that spoke to her too. And then we had someone else say the same kind of thing, that these themes, the themes kind of capture the essence of what the pattern is. It's not the full thing, but it's nice to have a name that works that well. So I invite you to try that on. Then there are processes that help maintain the patterns. And the green one is the essential motivators, and the red ones are the interaction styles. And then of course, cognitive dynamics, I couldn't fit on the chart. So didn't fit in the matrix anyway. So some of the challenges that I think we're going to face have a lot to do with how do we make this rich complexity able for us to, how do we make it so that for people who are wanting the bullet points and the, you know, make it simple. And one of my views is, well, there's content on this slide that I'm going to talk about, but this is what popped up. So we know this is complex, and we will schedule a follow-up session. So you can private chat me or public chat me if you want with your email, or you can email me and I'll let you know when that's going to happen. You can easily get my email, linda@lindaberens.com. Okay, so here's the thing, that some advantages of using these other lenses that I found helpful is that it's simple enough to get value in an hour. So you can explain the essence of it, but you need to be explaining the essential qualities of each pattern. So like for essential motivators or temperament, it's core psychological needs, and then related values, and then talents, and then some behaviors. So that's like a target that you're aiming at. I won't go over the other ones. It's also complex enough to reflect real life. So if you're a practitioner or an enthusiast sharing information with people, I think it's important for you to realize that that we're very complex, and the typologies are both elegant enough to be simple, but they also are complex. And so to be simple enough, you have to make sure you're not taking a quality and over stereotyping with it and that kind of thing. It's practical enough to make a difference. So there are many things that you can do with this, just like we've seen from some of the type lenses. And I think Catherine's, I didn't get to go to Catherine's session on, because I had to choose on interaction styles. That was an application of that. And then the temperament in terms of the wellness, that session that, and I've forgotten their names, and anyway, so that I also got to step in for a little bit. Okay, so there are a lot of practical things that it's a lot easier to do if you can have 4 patterns to talk about instead of 16, and then dynamic enough to foster real growth and development. So these are 4 perspectives, one for each of the 4 temperaments. My timer says it's 10 minutes. So those are kind of some of the thoughts I have about this. And so what I want to do is I'm going to stop the share because I don't have any more slides. And if we could have conversation a bit in the chat, perhaps, or if you want to raise your hand and make some comments about this whole idea of how do we help keep type information, how do we help it be still transformational to help people heal, help people grow and develop. And I don't know if you have more questions, things you want to say, that would be fine with me. I'm real good at silence, by the way.
Hello? Yeah, I'll say something.
Okay, Kevin.
So I think, well, just like this whole conference has been pretty neat, but it's just more and more evident to me now that you've really, really pushed those boundaries of psychological type. So I really do see you as like the Einstein of psychological type, like in the sense of how he's pushed the boundaries for in his field. What I feel like you've done that for psychological type.
Oh,
That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't welcome in the beginning in the type world. There were the culture wars between the view that David Kersey was trying to, not make a contribution, but do something. So that took a while, but I figured out if I learned the Jungian model, I would understand where they were coming from, and actually found that very useful and helpful. So I just hope that we can keep the benefits going and not get it so watered down or overly simplistic. Yeah, so.
Linda, I was just thinking that, with COVID, with coronavirus, there's so much talk, certainly in the UK, about mental health problems that are sort of accumulating, and that for years we're going to be dealing with mental health problems as a bit of a fallout from the coronavirus epidemic. And I'm just wondering, I'm not really expecting you to answer this, but it's a question for everyone. Type, I'm sure, can help with mental health generally, and in the current situation. I'm just wondering, what can we as a type community do to make type more, accessible and all those things, so that people who are struggling with the after effects of coronavirus can actually, get some benefits, some help through knowing about their type.
Right.
As I said, I'm not expecting you to know the answer, really.
Well, I have one answer.
Oh.
And that is, for each of the patterns, there's a core psychological need or a driver. And to the degree that we can recognize that, for example, those with a get things going interaction style might have been stressed in a different way by COVID than somebody with the behind the scenes style who was already teaching online. So we can, there are a lot of things we could do with the the stressors for each pattern. And I'm not sure how to make it easy to understand with cognitive dynamics, but certainly can with those. We did some webinars early on. I think they're probably still live. And maybe you can distribute the links to those. They were free. So, yeah, Natalie.
Hi, Linda. Catherine, as per your comment, I was going to say that community, recognizing yourself in another, and the bonding of that with all the learning. And one thing, Linda, that's been most transformational for me studying with you is the sort of window of community and connection, which allows access, as you were saying, Catherine, for anyone to very easily and seamlessly get a taste of what this is like. And then the communities that you've built in mentorship and in the studying and learning are transformative.
Good, thank you. There is a course called Community and Connection. That's the first Tuesday of every month. It's free. You just have to sign up for it. I don't think I put anything on there. It's interstrengthinstitute.org. Where you can find it. Anything
Hi,
else?
it's
Yeah.
Doris.
Hi.
I'll add that I really appreciate your holistic view and setting the scene of the context of everything, just the history of everything and how a type came about and how the different instruments came about. And I mean, introverted sensing is, not a strength of mine. So I really appreciate you laying it out in such an effective way that even I can get it.
Thank you. I actually don't like history. I hate history. Why my grandson's majoring in it? What are you doing? But it turns out that recently, last few years, I've been much more interested in history. So
it helps make sense of
Yeah.
today, I think, to a point.
Yeah.
And Catherine, if you haven't seen John Haxton's presentation on the 100 years of type and the pandemic, though there are some really interesting parallels.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, no, I'll have to watch that on recording.
Yeah, I did ask my grandson about the historical things, because when COVID first started, he said, every year in the 20s, there's been some sort of pandemic, epidemic thing. And then I also found some other writing that after that, one of those was the beginning of the Renaissance and Enlightenment and a whole lot of things. So I hope that that's what we're going to get out of COVID, is some major shift in transition. And I think that's what made me think about the title, about the transformational power of type, is how can we use this now? And if you haven't thought about putting the health and wellness kind of thing forward as an entree, because I think organizations are going to be needing that work. Anything else? Comments, questions? Yeah, Dean.
I will just add to Natalie and what others have said, is that working with you in the construct has really opened me up and softened me as a type practitioner, and softened in a way that I can meet someone where they are and they more readily understand the material and the concepts. It's very invitational as opposed to instructional.
Oh, thank you. I think a lot of that comes from the community that we have, not necessarily from me. I'm just really pretty good at being silent and let people talk.
Please go ahead, Jane.
Linda, I appreciated your words about the different lenses, and I've been thinking a lot about when it's good to be simplistic like when I'm working with teachers, if I can just get them to understand extroversion and introversion, students have a better chance of surviving in a classroom. But looking at the pandemic, for example, there was a simplistic article in our local paper on, have you changed from extrovert to introvert during the pandemic? Versus, I'm wondering if you have a comment on how we get this out there. What were you doing when you were extroverting and when you were introverting? And what haven't you been doing as far as your cognitive processes I would think be the more complex way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and E and I are such, standard things that's probably a good way in. Somebody said they wanted to learn how to, years ago, I wanted to learn how to communicate better and work better with introverts. And I said, but introverted what? It's like, it turned out she was working with introverted sensing types and her preferences were ENFJ. So it's a challenge for me to try to make it simple and easy, but I think it is a way in. And those with introverted preferences probably are not quite as stressed as those with extroverted preferences with the lockdowns. My stress is having to get up in the morning and go grocery shopping in order for my husband and myself to be safe. I have to get up at 6:30 to go grocery shopping.
Yeah, I was thinking more, the balance of perception and judgment in our extroverted and introverted worlds, and what are we not doing in this environment, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, I think there's also one of the contributions for cognitive dynamics is to help people open up some of the ways to expand, how could we turn that into a growth and development opportunity? So that actually, my daughter has ENFJ preferences, but she has been in an introverted mode for the last several years. And I don't think misses going out. I mean, she misses some connection, but she's not that social anymore. Other comments? We have 1 minute.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Jane was saying. Jane, I saw a video that you and Jill Chivers did in the beginning of the pandemic that talked about extroversion and introversion and what you were doing that's extroverted and what you were doing that's introverted. And I thought that was a really great way to get it out. So I'm answering your question from what you've done.
Of course, that was 12 months ago, Cindy. I don't remember.
You didn't remember.
Thank you.
What a challenge, yes.
We actually had a meeting at Linda about interaction styles in the pandemic in a smaller type academy, and it was really interesting how it was the drivers for the interaction style that seemed to be really influencing or demonstrating or showing the stress, and the interaction styles was really a useful framework at that time.
Yeah,
which
does have an aspect of introversion and extroversion in it, although it's about making the first move in a relationship, so initiating and responding. That would be helpful. I mean, it seemed to me that, oops, I forgot to put my phone on silent. It seemed to me that those with the get things going preference who really want to that pattern, really want to have more interaction, they might be spending a whole bunch of time on Zoom to get it, and then they get Zoom fatigue, and
actually, Linda, I sort of look at it in terms of the 8 cognitive functions, and even though I'm extroverted, intuitive, dominant, it's really helped me to stop cycling through things and really come up with, okay, what's important, right, what's my value system, and what's important for me to do, and sort of bringing things together. So I'm writing much more rather than just having to interact with people or, get busy doing things.
Yeah, I think that knowledge you have of yourself, Phoebe, is probably helpful to,
Yes.
spark the growth and development. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So I'm quite happy to stay longer. It's 12:03, so we are probably past our deadline for some people. There is a session in an hour. And some people probably need to eat, but happy to stay on as long as you want.
Okay, so if I could, I'll stop the recording now, and I'm sure everybody would like to demonstrate their appreciation to you, Linda. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for showing